Hey everybody, I'm Scott Weichel. You're listening to My Kind of Country on a Monday night here on Fish Creek Radio with our very special tribute to the great Ernest Tubb tonight. And sure enjoyed having Jack Milletti and Lynn Owsley on the show tonight. And one thing we have not talked about a lot is the great Ernest Tubb Record Store in Nashville that has been there since 1947, folks. And he had a gentleman to carry it on for him and really continue that tradition. He's done just as much for country music, I think, as Ernest Tubb has done over the years. And it's a pleasure to have him on the show tonight. We're going to talk about the history of the record shop. This is my friend David McCormick. David, how are you tonight?
Doing good, Scott. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
Well, the Ernest Tubb Record Store started, I believe, in 1947, right? And it was on...
That's correct.
It was in a different location for a few years, right, before it moved to where it is now?
It was. It was on Commerce Street. It was about a block and a half from the Ryman Auditorium. And the record shop moved to its present location in 1951. The store was very small on Commerce Street. They didn't have a lot of room for anything. Back then, they just had the 78s, of course, and they took up more room than they had to spare up there. So they moved to Broadway in 1951.
Now, when he first started the store, it was primarily a mail order service to be able to get records out to people that couldn't find them. Is that right?
Yes, it was. Mail order was the big thing back in those years. A lot of people couldn't find not only his records, but they couldn't find country music anywhere. And he had kept hearing this on the road, and just came up with the idea of opening a mail order service and having a record shop as well for any locals or any people that wanted to come to the Grand Ole Opry, which was, of course, just a block and a half away. So the mail order worked out very well back in those years. And I know he told me one time they went to the post office 3 times a day. The record shop had a truck back then that they carried the mail in and used it for different things. But they would make a trip 3 times a day, and they would get all the sacks of mail or orders on that truck as they could possibly get without without breaking records. Back in that day, 78s broke real easy, and they learned the hard way how to mail records out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Tubbs lost about $50,000 in that investment over that first year or two, and it was all broken records that was returned, but he made everything right. Every broken record that someone would get, he would replace it, and did that over the years.
Well, I'm sure that really helped not only his record sales, but as you said, a lot of the country music artists. That probably made a huge impact on their sales at that time.
Well, it did, and he mentioned to me that when they opened the record shop, there were a lot of record stores across the country that were up in arms about it and thought that he would be a competition to them, and it wasn't that way at all, because if he did a record, played a record on the Midnight Jamboree, he would always say, go to your local record store, and if they don't have it, then let us know and we'll send it to you. So it really promoted record shops, not only his, but record shops all across the country.
That's something else. That's something we could all take a lesson from today and kind of help each other out. We need to get back to that.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's right.
David, when did the Midnight Jamboree first start?
Same year, May the 3rd of 1947, when the record shop officially opened.
Okay. So they were doing it at that place on Commerce there then to begin with.
On Commerce Street, yeah. They sure were. We've got a lot of great pictures of Hank Williams and Red Foley, and oh gosh, I can't remember who all that was there that night when the record shop opened, but it worked very well.
Well, I know that the show is recorded now, but back at that time, they did the show right after the Grand Ole Opry was done. Is that right?
That's right. It was at midnight, right after the Opry. Yes, and could get very few people in that little record shop.
I'll bet. Well, you can always listen on the radio on WSM, and I believe that is the second longest running show on WSM.
It is. It's the second longest country music radio show. Yes.
Well, tell me when you first met Ernest Tubb, and how did you come to go to work at the record store?
Well, I was working part-time at the record shop. Hadn't met him, but I got a part-time job there. I was starving to death. I came to Nashville to go to school, and I was working 3 jobs to make ends meet. So anyway, working at the record shop on the weekends, and of course the Midnight Jamboree. And actually, Mrs. Tubb put in the good word for me. When he hired me, he thought that I was too young. I was 21 years old when he hired me to be the manager of the record shop, and she kept telling him that he needed to give me a chance. So my interview was down at the old Limbaugh's restaurant on Broadway. He told me on a Saturday night, he said, meet me at Limbaugh's at about 7 o'clock, and we'll talk about it. So that's what we did. And he told me that night, he said, I'll hire you just like I do at Texas Troubadour. He said, we'll look at it in 90 days. And he said, but you might not work out. He said, if it doesn't work, then you can continue to work your part-time job there, working nights and weekends or whenever they needed me. So that was the deal. And I'm still waiting on the interview. He never did give me that 90-day interview, so I'm still waiting on that. Maybe one day when I get on the other side, he'll let me know whether I did a good job or not.
Well, I would certainly say you did. Well over 50 years. That's I'd say that's a job well done.
Years. Yeah, 53. Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. A lot of changes in music over the years, and
yeah.
Now you always carried country music at the store.
Yes.
That was always the mainstay. And how was it weathering the storm, so to speak, when rock and roll came in and all that kind of stuff?
Well, that was something that we considered that might be a problem for us, but it actually was not. You know, rock and roll kind of made country music. It helped make country music well known. So we didn't have any issues with that at all.
One of the things I want to ask about the Midnight Jamboree, who determined back in those days, who determined who was going to be on the show? Was that something Ernest, was he very hands-on with that?
Well, he did that whenever he could, but when he was out, back in those years, there was a regular host, such as the Wilburn brothers would host it for 10, 12 weeks at a time when Mr. Tubb would be on the road. The Stonewall Jackson did it a lot. Louvin brothers did it a lot. Different ones hosted the show.
And Ernest, now he came and did the Jamboree a lot. I know he was on the road, 200-300 days a year, but he came back and played at the Jamboree a whole lot too, right?
Yeah, that was back when the Opry wanted 26 appearances a year, and he always made it back for what was required for him to maintain membership in the Grand Ole Opry.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty rough because they were out there on the road and working the road and trying to get back to do the Midnight Jamboree, and of course the Opry, I should say, Opry and the Midnight Jamboree. So, yeah, he was on a lot back in those years.
So did you see a lot of those shows back then?
No, I didn't. I came in the 72 is when I took over the record shop. Those shows would have been back in the '60s, early '60s through mid-late 1960s. So I didn't get to see them all. No. Yeah.
When did you take over the business? Was it after Ernest passed away then?
It was, yes, in 1984. I purchased the company after his death.
Uh-huh.
He had fixed it to where there were four owners of the record shop. Mr. Mosley, Charlie Mosley, was his partner. He brought him in 1948 and made him a partner. And actually, Mr. Mosley was the one that saved the record shop after the first year of Mr. Tubb losing all that $50,000 I mentioned earlier. That was a whole lot of money back then, and Charlie Mosley was very well known as an accountant. He did a lot of taxes for many of the Grand Ole Opry people, and Mr. Tubb they just had a handshake agreement over the years that he would be his partner, 50-50 partner, and that's the way it was. And then he brought me in 1980, I believe it was, 80 or 81, somewhere in there. Brought Justin in the year after that, so there were four of us. But a stockholders agreement was written somewhere around 84, 83, 84, somewhere in there, that gave me the right to purchase the company after Mr. Tubb died. Actually, any partner could have bought it, but Mr. Mosley had passed, and Justin did not want to purchase anything.
How many locations of the record store were there over the years?
Seven stores over the years.
I know you had one in Fort Worth, Texas for a time. I actually visited that one, and there was one in Pigeon Forge too, I believe, right?
Well, if I had to pick a favorite store, it would have been Fort Worth. I hated to see that close, but our rent situation down there, where they kept going up on the rent, and things in country music started to not be so good. So we just couldn't make it with the high rent that we would have been paying in that complex. I hated that because that was a great store.
That was a nice store right there in the stockyards. It was a neat location.
Yes.
Yeah. And then tell me about the one out on Music Valley Drive, and the Midnight Jamboree started being played out there. When did that all take place?
Yeah, we moved out there in 1979 and did the Midnight Jamboree out there until the new complex was built, and we moved into the theater. That would have been 1995. But before that, from 79 through the time that the theater opened, we did the Midnight Jamboree in a little small stage area that we built onto the record shop. I always called it the lean-to. People down south, or where I'm from, if you built a barn or something onto the side of a building, you'd call it a lean-to. So anyway, we did the Midnight Jamboree in that. We fixed a little area onto the side of the record shop and fixed a stage and put some seats down and had an area for people to sit and stand as well. There was enough room that it accommodated the crowd. So anyway, it was done there until we moved into the theater in 1995.
I got to see some shows at that theater. Of course, you were there the night we were there with Freddie Hart and David Frizzell, and what a night was. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, on the shop on 417 Broadway, that's been expanded a couple times since it was opened, right?
It has. We just pushed the wall back over the years a couple of different times. Yeah, we needed the space, and we just took out an office or two and kept Mr. Tubb's office back there. It's just like it was when he was there. We didn't bother that, but there were 2 or 3 more offices back there that we took out to expand the show. The record shop.
Mm-hmm. Did you get to spend a lot of time with Ernest?
No, I didn't. No, when he got off the road in 1982, I did. I would do a lot of running for him. Like we'd go out to he had a post office box out in Franklin, Tennessee, and I'd pick him up and take him out there, and he'd pick his mail up and stuff like that. I think from 82 to 84 we got closer than we had ever been before, because he came off the road in 82, so it gave us a lot more time together. So anyway, I cherish those years, and a lot of great memories of. He would always open his mail up on the way back to his house and read his mail to me. So he loved his email, loved his fans, and I got to be in on a lot of those great times.
That's wonderful. What are some memories that stand out for you working and owning the record store for so many years?
Well, I'll have to say, Scott, the best memory that I have is standing out on the floor at the Broadway shop and feeling cool air hit my face for the first time. See, we didn't have any air conditioning in there for years and years.
Okay.
And I finally talked to Mr. Mosley and Mr. Tubb into putting some air in, and I told them, especially Mr. Mosley, I said, if we could get a little cool air in here, customers are going to stay in here a little longer. Oh, that's one of my highlights. I know that don't sound like a big deal, but I can never forget feeling cool air hit my face for the first time in all those years before we had air conditioning.
Well, David, that's a great answer. I didn't expect that one, but that's a good answer.
Well, that's I'd have to say that's my number one memory. I've got to meet a lot of people over the years. The record shop has afforded me a lot of opportunity. I've got to meet people from every spectrum of music. I remember one time it was after closing time. I was there by myself, and there was a group of guys that came in, and I noticed that they were buying a lot of stuff, and I just thought I'd wait on them. And they came up. One of them came up to the register to ask for something, and I said, where are you guys from? And he said, Northern Ireland, and we're playing over here in Murfreesboro tomorrow night. You need to come and see us. And I said, what's the name of your group? And he said, U2.
Oh, no kidding.
And I can't remember the guy's name that was the lead singer in that. Do you know?
Bono.
Yes. I apologized to him. I said, I am so sorry that I didn't recognize you. I should have. But anyway, he was so nice, and he got such a kick out of the fact that I didn't know him. You know. So anyway, there's been a lot of people that I knew, of course, and some that I didn't, that came in the record shop to say hello. Ringo was in recently, and he bought a Kitty Wells CD.
Wow, really?
Yeah, Kitty Wells' Greatest Hits.
Oh, that's
And
great.
we made a picture of him holding that CD.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I know the Beatles were big Buck Owens fans. Of course, they recorded Act Naturally. And,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I know they always had ties in country music, too. That's pretty amazing.
That's right. It sure is, yeah.
Well, I got to talk albums with you here for a second.
Sure.
What are some of your standout, maybe favorite or standout albums that Ernest Tubb did over the years?
You know, I think the later ones that he recorded in the 70s would be my favorite stuff. He sounded better than he ever did. there's one album in particular, and I always mentioned it when somebody came in that would want something that he did, and Pete Drake did a session of him. It was called the Last Sessions. They were going to put it out. I forgot how they were going to do it, but it was packaged every way but right. Thank goodness for Rose Drake. She called me and asked me what would be the best thing to do with this 47 sides, and I told her, put it out, all-time greatest hits, the Last Sessions, and that's what she did, and that's been our best-selling Ernest Tubb CD. That would probably be my favorite of all of his things, because he was in good voice, and the session came out great.
Yeah, and
that was one that Pete Drake, he decided to reissue that thing and put a guest on it. You know, it was called The Legend and Legacy. That was the same tracks and same session that he did. And Pete put it out with all these artists on it. Mr. Tubb didn't know anything about it. I picked him up that night and took him over to hear the sessions, and that was the only time that I ever saw a tear in his eye. Pete started playing the album. Here, Johnny Cash came on, or here, Loretta came on. You know, that he had everybody that was anybody in the music business on that album, and it was just wonderful. And I think that's one of the best tributes there ever was for Ernest Tubb and Pete Drake. Thank goodness, and he's going into the Hall of Fame this year. And very, very well deserved. But he did a lot of wonderful things for Mr. Tubb over the years, and I'm so thankful.
And the original tracks weren't issued till many years later, though, with just Ernest singing them.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And I love that collection. You're right. He sounds great on it, and the instrumentation is just fabulous. You know, it's more of a modern technology and stuff like that. And I like a lot of his early '70s stuff that he did with MCA. Say Something Nice to Sarah was a great album. One Sweet Hello. And those are great albums. I really like that period too.
I think the '70s were he was in his best voice in the '70s.
I agree.
So glad he decided to go ahead and track 47 sides there, because that was one that needed to be done.
Well, we're going to play some songs from that collection right now. I think that would be a good way to end the interview.
All right.
And David, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, not only for taking the time to be on my show, but I also want to thank you for everything that you have done and continue to do to keep real country music alive and well, just as Mr. Tubb would have wanted.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful honor for me to get to have all these great years and memories, and I hope I can keep on doing it for a little while longer.
Well, we sure do too, and you are loved. That is no doubt about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, that is David McCormick right here on My Kind of Country, and we're going to play some songs from those fabulous Pete Drake sessions with Ernest Tubb as we continue.
I've called and I've called you, but each time I phone, they always tell me that you're not at home. I've written you letters and knocked at your door, but don't worry, darling, I won't bother you anymore. So answer the phone when it rings, darling. And if somebody knocks, let them in. You don't have to be it's me, 'cause I'll never bother you again. Oh, Pete Mitchell. I'm writing this letter to tell you goodbye. Somebody told me how you sit and cry, 'cause you found a new love since I have been gone, and wish I'd forget you and that I'd just leave you alone. So answer the phone when it rings, darling, and if somebody knocks, let 'em in. You don't have to be afraid that it's me, 'cause I'll never bother you again.